small little bit of introduction here. She's a business consultant with 25 years industry experience, a management and cost accountant with an MBA and a Master of Science in Quality, specializing in lean and quality management systems compliant with ISO 9001. I'll hand you off to Carol. There you go, Carol.
Thanks, okay. Pat. Okay, so can everybody see this PowerPoint presentation? Yeah, just checking it's sharing. Okay, yeah, okay, cool. Yep. So, okay, so is it time to review your customers and their needs? And the answer is a resounding yes. I mean, I think we're all used to change over the last 10, 15 years, but I do believe, and I think, you know, most academics would agree that in the last 4 years, the changes are becoming, the magnitude of the changes are increasing, and they're more resounding changes. I mean, all you have to do is look at what's happened in the US with the government and with Trump and how he's turning everything upside down, and then Brexit, and then you also have climate change has become a hot topic in the last few years and seriously impacted businesses on a global basis. And then obviously we have COVID. So Pat has kindly just gone through this slide, and I suppose this was just to say what gives me the authority to talk to you today on re-examining your customer needs. So as Pat mentioned, I'm a lean consultant, and lean principles are basically about delivering value in your processes and your outcomes and matching those values with what your customers actually want and need. And there are 5 main principles, and you can see them there. But today I'm just going to focus on the establishing the pulse, focusing on the 4th principle. The lean pull can be defined as it's defining the value from the customer's perspective. So just look at, hopefully people can see this graph on the right. So, you know, looking at the pull factor first, and that's what we want to focus on, is that ultimately, no matter where you are on a supply chain or a service or product who your customers are, ultimately it has to go to a consumer. And if we're not getting that bit right, what you see happening in the push graph there with the blocks, you know, all bunching up together is what's going to happen. And that's basically represents a block in your systems, and you will have inefficiencies, and that's where you start failing all your stakeholders, both your business, your customers, and your staff. So I want to give you today is just really, I suppose, if I can just give you a framework that you can go off and maybe work with to give you, I suppose, a structured way to go and actually review your customer needs. I'm going to base my framework. I'll combine 2 frameworks that are already out there in the ether. So the first one is the Pastel Framework, which some of you may have heard of before. And it's really just about analyzing your operational environment, or your ecosystem, as people like to call it nowadays. And, you know, there's all the main top headings there: your political, economic, social, environmental, legal, and technological. And if you get a chance to look, I'm happy to send on the slides. They're just from Coca-Cola's perspective, what factors they consider. And I'm going to combine that with what's called a horizon scanner. So this comes from the Chartered Global Management Association. And this is quite recent, and it's based on scenario planning. So I suppose it incorporates the uncertainty of the future and how businesses have to constantly deal with uncertainty, and it's getting more and more difficult to plan. So this is basically about doing your plans for different scenarios. Now, you'll see the headings are very similar to Pastel, but what it does do is it, you know, here in this particular graph, it goes 5, 10, 15 years. But what I would be suggesting is okay, so our first scenario would be our COVID time, and we don't really know how long this is going to go on for. I mean, the signs are positive of a vaccine by 2021, but then the vaccine has to be manufactured, it has to be distributed. So it's you know, it's not that clear, but cautiously optimistic that hopefully this won't go beyond 2021. Then, you know, as I said, there's when the vaccine comes. So we have a vaccine, and then, you know, not everybody's going to get vaccinated at one go. So that in itself will make it difficult for businesses to plan. They'll have to be aware of what sections of, you know, of what countries are getting done first, what sections of society, how it's going to be rolled out. And then after that, you're going to have, okay, so we've gotten through the pandemic, we've gotten through COVID, and how are things going to lie, you know, and it's going to be, I think what we had before, I really think people should just forget it, because it's just never going to be the same again. So they're the kind of 3 scenarios that I'm going to look at in the framework to review your customer needs. And I'll combine these with doing a SWOT analysis, and that's just looking at your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Okay, so now we're moving on to, I suppose, my little framework. So here we are in the middle. So this is your enterprise, and what I have here on the bottom is your mission statement, or what you are about. And no matter what your business is, this is applicable. So I've just put my own in. I help businesses succeed, but you'll all have your own. And then this circle represents your organization, and everything inside the circle is something that you can control. And there we have your little COVID sign. So we're going to now look at, I suppose, the pestle area, the external factors that will impact your business. So we'll start off with government policy. Now, as Pat touched on there, there are opportunities here. With change comes opportunity, and if your business is adaptable enough, and if it's like lean, if it's efficient, ideally you can make, so I'm just going to admit somebody here, you can make the most of those opportunities. So in government policy, in any recession, the big spenders in any country is the government. So the government have committed to spend 5 billion, and then you also have another 750 billion from the EU. So we should get some of that. So, there's an opportunity. Look at where the government spend money, get on any of the, like I myself made sure I was on the Enterprise Ireland list, make sure you're signed up with the EU tenders. If you're a small business, as Pat said, collaborate with other businesses so that you're of a decent enough size that you can actually win some of these tenders. Also, I would say that government policy, no matter what they do or where they spend this money, they will be aligning it with the green agenda. So we can't, we shouldn't really forget that. So there, as I see it, the main things from government policy, they might bring some challenges, but overall, I think it brings an opportunity. Sorry. Next is the legislative and regulatory. The main part of this is your health and safety. So I think, there's an awful lot of small businesses now are moving into this quite lucrative area to get businesses ready for bringing back their staff in a COVID environment. And I think going forward, these are not going to go away. These will be here to stay. They also, of course, pose a challenge because there's costs associated with making yourself compliant. But again, it's about accessing the government funding that's available for those. And then I would also remind you that there's also the targets in the Paris Agreement. I do think the environmental issues haven't gone away. So I think everything that you do should really be geared, keeping an eye on what environmental legislation is coming down the road. Okay, and this is sort of a big one. This is the societal changes, excuse me. Society's priorities have just been turned upside down in the last year. And, even just as a consumer, I know myself, I'm not doing things I thought I couldn't live without. And I'm focusing on things now I thought I'd never accept. So priorities have completely changed. It's all about health. And then also before even COVID happened, you could see that, again, the environment was very much on the top of people's mindset, and that drive was coming from the young people coming through. And then there's the attitude to technologies. One thing that the pandemic has done is it's kind of pushed us all along into, like, I didn't expect to see myself sitting here giving a webinar in June, and here I am, and now I'm finally quite comfortable with it. But certainly back in February to do this, I really wouldn't have liked it at all. So we're all just getting much more accepting and used to technology. And then there was the actual changes in technology, and I think it's been well documented that again the pandemic has forced an acceleration in innovation in technology, and you're getting a higher adoption rate. So I've spoken to, for example, I've been in touch with a guy who does 3D videos, and he's an estate agent as well. And kind of around Christmas, nobody wanted to know about it. People wanted to come and see the houses, and he kind of felt it was the future. And now the future's here, and he's now under pressure to scale up much more quickly than he had planned. So I think that's a real, yes, it's a challenge, but I think it's a real opportunity to bring in efficiencies that there was no reason not to bring them in. We're just a bit more ready for them now. And then the economy. So obviously COVID is having an effect mainly on the employment. And at the, we're not really seeing the impact on the, the government isn't really seeing the impact on the public purse, because it's actually shoring up most of the wages, and it's committed to do that until next April, which I think is really commendable, because you see in the States and in the UK now they're starting to pull those resources, and unemployment rates are just going to soar. So I do think you will see unemployment obviously grow here, in particular in the hospitality sector, but they're generally not high taxpayers. So it'll be more this, it'll be from a consumer perspective that businesses will feel that impact. And then hopefully, but do keep in mind that, this can't go on forever. And if we don't have a vaccine, if things aren't ready to get back to normal by next April, this is something you're going to have to plan for. And then you also have Brexit, which hasn't gone away. And I think that's going to have a significant impact on our economy, partially because, it'll just add to the cost of doing business with one of our biggest trade partners, but also because it kind of reflects, I think, the mess, for want of a better word, I hope there's nobody here from the UK, that the UK is in, and it just seems a bit lost. So I just think, from their own economic perspective, they're in for a really rough ride. And as one of our biggest exporters, that we will feel the impact of that. And I think that's something that, will carry through more to sort of the vaccine and the post-COVID stage. Then, you have the United States, who don't seem to be handling COVID very well. And that's just one of its many problems. I suppose I did an article a while ago about exposing the underbelly of the States. And I think what the healthcare crisis has done is really exposed all the other societal issues and economic issues that are going on in the States. And again, they're by far our biggest exporter. So although we haven't seen it yet, that will filter through, is my belief. It will filter through, and we could be in for a rough ride for the next, 5 years or so. Okay. So there's sort of all the external things, which is what I want to focus on today. But, we do have, so you're looking at all the opportunities and threats under each of those headings. But then what we do have, these are all the things that you as an enterprise have control over. And sort of the way the graph works is, the closer you are to your enterprise, the more control you have. So, you do have control over your product, your marketing, your processes, your pricing, what technology you use, what people you have. And then, you do have control over your finances, if you link it all into the others. And then you have your suppliers, which you have slightly less control over, your business partners, your premises. If you're renting, you mightn't have as much control over that. Again, the whole question of whether we need premises anymore, are we overpaying when we only use half the space? All those questions are arising. And then your customers. So you need to, based on the context that you've analysed here, looking at all the opportunities and threats, you need to look at your strengths and weaknesses in all these areas and try and match them up. And then, when you've done that exercise, you need to come back here and say, is this actually relevant anymore? Can I still do it? Am I still achieving it? And it might be that because these things have changed so much, and whatever you have here just isn't going to be able to deliver on those changes, that perhaps this needs to change slightly, or you just might need to diversify or pivot. And just a reminder that you need to do this exercise, I would say, for at least 2 scenarios. So one is while we have the pandemic, and then the other is when we get the vaccine. And I would also suggest, a third one, but you'd have a bit more time to that, is when actually, the vaccine has been completely rolled out and things get back to the new normal. Okay, so you're going to, I suppose, when you're looking at your own resources, you really want to have data-driven decisions. You don't want to be going on gut feel, and that's something that as managers and business owners we all do. And it's not a bad thing to have, but it's nice to have it backed up with actual data, because that helps you make a good decision. My suggestions would be to engage. I mean, we're kind of living in a strange time at the moment. It's almost like a bubble, and it's not like reality. So for the moment, it's just engage, make sure you're aware of everything that's going on, all the supports that are there, listen to people, listen to where the issues are arising. And then there's some really good websites to get information on actual factual research on what impact the pandemic is having on both an economic perspective and a societal perspective. The company statistics office is a great place to go. They've issued a report at least up to March, and I think their June one is due out soon, that shows the employment in different sectors across the economy. And I personally found that useful, just to scan my eye down and say, okay, so hospitality, that's definitely, you know, going to be severely impacted in the short run. Technology, they're doing quite well. Pharmaceuticals, they're doing quite well. You know, so you can pick and you can kind of see quickly enough where the money's going to be in the short term, medium and long term, just by using your common sense and having done your external analysis. And then the central bank, another fantastic place to just look at consumer habits and how they're spending. Are they going online? Are they going into shops? Are they using their taps? Are they spending in supermarkets? You can get all that information there. And then the ESRI is more from sort of this social, it's more from the social perspective, and they actually have a whole section dedicated to COVID research. So that's just a really good place just to understand how, you know, this might affect your consumers, who's going to be damaged, for want of a better word, when all this is over. You know, what parts of society are really going to be struggling, and so therefore identifying what consumers are going to be affected and what their needs are going to be. And your options, well, so when you've done the exercise, okay, so what does that mean? What am I going to do? Well, you can scale up. If you can reap the opportunities. You might decide to scale down, and this is a very realistic option to have, especially while COVID is in place. Like I look at the hospitality industry and I think, okay, they really need to figure out what the cost is of staying open, and if it's larger than the cost of closing down, then perhaps they need to just shut down for a while, but balance that with, you know, maintenance costs, keeping their brand alive. You know what I mean? So scaling down is an option. It's certainly not an easy one. And I personally am a big advocate for, if you have good staff, you do everything you can to hold on to them for this period, because it will end and you are going to need your good staff when you're ready to pick things up again. You can pivot. So a really good example of this that's close to my heart is clothes manufacturers pivoted into making PPE here, you know, so it depends on your equipment, on your skills. That's where you're looking at your internal assets and see, can you actually pivot into something that there's going to be plenty of money in, that the government wants, that's related to healthcare. I mean, medical glass, there's going to be a massive shortage of medical glass. I've read at least 3 separate articles in really good magazines saying the world needs medical glass. So if you know anyone who makes some medical glass or can, get them cracking. Or diversify. So you might just want to spread your risk a bit more and say, okay, what I'm doing, there's still a need for it. And, you know, I can see a demand for it. But, you know, I have the resources to be able to diversify out. So that's it.